Good evening. Good evening. Appreciate you being here. We're going to get started because Crystal Vance just talks too much. Because she has so much to tell us. Appreciate you coming. Let me just remind you that if you have a question and you just don't want to ask it in front of everybody, but you still would like to get an answer, I'd encourage you to grab one of these cards up here on this speaker. Just fill it out, drop it in the offering box, leave it on the stand, and we'll try our best to answer those. We've had maybe 5 or 6 of them handed in since we started now 7 weeks ago. This is week 7. So if you have a question, throw it on there. Prayer requests. I know that Shelly Cates had surgery today. Kim Workman had surgery last week. And there was another one. I can't remember what it is. I'll think of it in a minute. Prayer requests from this side right here. Anybody? Oh, wait a minute. I thought maybe this was the good side to sit on, but Deb. Okay, unspoken by Deb. This side, prayer requests. Ray. For Fred to sit beside him. Kevin. And Bruce Roach, Dave's brother, having surgery next week. Missy Beckner. Remember Tony Augusto and Mr. Allen? Robert, why can't I ever remember that? I always want to say James or something, but I don't know why. Carol Harless. Who? Okay. That was Larry, since you said St. Mary's, Larry Metcalf was back in the ER last night at St. Mary's this time, and they feel like maybe some fresh eyes have shined some light on what's going on with him, and they really feel like maybe they've got a better picture of what needs to happen for him. So he's home. They didn't keep him, but he had just a lot of issues, but they were able to go through some things, some of the meds that he's been on that they don't think he needed to be on, and so forth and so on. So we'll just believe that the Lord will help him through that. So remember Larry. Anything else? Anybody else? Let's stand. Huh? What? Oh. Next Tuesday? Okay. Steph and Steve headed to Cincy next Tuesday for continued progress. Take that. Yeah. Well, don't let me pray by myself. Lord, thank you for today. Thank you for your awesomeness. Thank you for being a great, great, great God. Thank you for being a God in heaven that's not surprised to any of our circumstances, but a God that's intensely involved in our lives. And for that, we're so thankful. So glad that you are a God that can do all things, even those things that are far more than we could ever ask or think of you to do. So we just present to you the needs that have been mentioned here, those that are in the hospital, those that have had surgery, those who are going through testing, Lord, just all the different circumstances and scenarios that we have in our lives, Lord God. We know that you can reach down from the throne room and touch people's lives. God, I pray you'll do that in such a way that we would hear testimonies and praise reports of how you've touched your people. God, we pray tonight for our class that you would just continue to help us, and continue to give Crystal the words, Lord God, that would just continue to help us as we continue this journey and this conversation about death and dying. I pray for every classroom. Let every classroom just have a lesson that will change young people's lives. And I pray as a church, God, we can continue to be a light shining in a world of darkness. So I just pray you'll help us tonight in all that we do. God, we love you. We praise you. We bless you. For it is in Christ's name that we pray. Someone say amen. Amen. Turn around to about 4 or 5 people, shake their hand, hug their neck, bump their knuckles, tweak their cheek. Let them know you're glad to see them in church. Let me remind you of 2 more things real quickly. First, if you have a comment or a question, if you would, please just raise your hand long enough for me to see you. I need to bring you a microphone because we are video recording this, and we want other people who are watching this at home or wherever they're at to be able to hear what you're saying. So please, if you have a question or a comment, just raise your hand. We'll get a microphone to you as quick as possible. And then the other prayer request that I needed to mention was Shelley Neal's grandmother passed away. Funeral will be Friday. I think some of you probably saw the family dinner that we're going to do Friday afternoon. But Joanne Ramsey she's been at Heritage for the last 10 years, and it's the only sprinkle baptism I ever did in my life. She wanted to be baptized, and she was in the nursing home, and there was just no way to get to a tank or a tub, and so we sprinkled. Now, if that makes me an awful pastor, you'll just have to pray and ask God to forgive me for that, but I think I did the right thing. So we want to remember Shelley and her family. Do you appreciate Crystal Vance? Has she been doing a good job?
Aw. Thanks. That's nice. Thank you. Does anybody have any questions about last week? Anything we talked about? Did you all fill out your paperwork? No? Jeez. I do. I left it in my van, but I'll bring you some next week. Yeah. That's all right. They were all gone, so I expect people to fill them out. Okay. So tonight we're just going to talk about the journey of letting go and letting be. So this is probably the question that we get asked the most is, how will I know when? How will I know when to make these decisions? And this is always my answer. Because to me, this is probably the most important thing. And if you get nothing else out of this class other than filling out your medical power of attorney papers, this is probably the most important. So when the quality of your life becomes more important to you than the quantity of your life, then that's the time you make the change, right? So I'm going to say something, and I don't mean it maybe the way it's going to come out, but there are worse things than death, right? And I think if you walk around any intensive care unit in America, you will see that. So for those people, they're living one more day, right? But the quality of their life is probably not acceptable. So these are just some common themes that we hear. Why is it so hard to let our loved ones go? And some of you guys have even, said some of these. You're worried about the person's soul, right? Where are they going to go? How will I know that? And I don't think there's any good answer to that question, personally. I've been in rooms where, again, this is going to sound terrible, but I've been in rooms where I've thought, I don't know why this person is still alive. There's literally no reason for this person to be alive. But they'll live for another 2 or 3 days. And in my head, I think that's God dealing with that person, right? And I don't know what's happening in that, and neither does their families. But I don't know that you ever get that peace. Now, I know even in my own family, we've had this conversation of, did that person, come to know God before they died? And I do think maybe sometimes families get a peace. Yeah, I feel like that person, but I don't ever know the answer to that. But sometimes I think that's maybe why people linger a little longer than we know why, is because, God is giving them that opportunity. I'm going to tell myself that anyway. Role adjustments. This is probably harder for me now than ever because I no longer am just talking to 70-year-olds. I'm talking to people who are my age, and that is horrible. I have a lady right now that's 35 years old. She has 4 kids. And she's probably not going to live a month. And that's hard, right? I can justify an 85-year-old person dying. It's really hard to justify a 35-year-old dying when she has 4 babies at home. But the truth is, in that situation, there's going to be a ton of role adjustments happening there. There was a lady I got to be very, very close with. She had 3 daughters. She had breast cancer. The oldest girl was 19 at the time, probably 16 and 12. And when she passed away, the oldest daughter and I had kind of became friends, and she said, who's going to take my sister's prom dress shopping? And I was like, you. And that stinks. You shouldn't have to. You're 19. but that's going to be your role. I mean, you're kind of going to have to be the mommy here. I'll tell you, I'm a big storyteller. I'm sure you've caught on to that by now. But mamaws and papaws who've been married for 60 years, my favorite, I love to sit with those little old people and talk to them about their marriage and things. And one little guy that I had, little old men are my thing. Like, when Daniel and I got married, I was like, listen, we don't have to have kids. Just let me adopt a little old man to take care of. Yeah, and every time our kids misbehave, he's like, I really should have went with that little old man option. But I was talking to him, and the lady had came in and had been sick for a long time, but didn't tell anyone, because that's what we do as women. And she had stockpiled all this food, and her family was like, we asked her, like, Mom, why are you buying all this food? Well, Papa, her husband of 65 years, had never been to the grocery store. He didn't know how to write a check. So that was her way of saying, I'm dying, and this is how I'm going to continue to take care of you, right? So you see a lot of that. This is probably the thing that, and I think somebody mentioned it in here one day about paying bills. Daniel gets on to me all the time about that. If I die, you're not going to, I'm like, they'll find me. If I owe them money, I'm sure someone will call me. Yeah. Not having enough time to prepare. And there's some truth to this, but sometimes that's not really the truth. And what I mean by that is sometimes when things happen unexpectedly, you don't have time to prepare for death. But sometimes it's that you don't have time to prepare for it because you've been ignoring it for the last however long, right? So you kind of put it off. Let's not talk about anything. And then, right at the end, you're kind of scrambling to figure stuff out. Inability to cope. This is a hard one for me, and this is where I get in trouble a lot of times. Because that's true for families sometimes. They just have a really hard time accepting what is happening. And so sometimes that inability to cope with what is happening leads us to a place where it's really hard for them to let go, right? Because they haven't taken those grieving. Grieving doesn't start when someone dies. It starts long before they die. You start that grieving process long before the person dies. So these are just some common concerns that we hear a lot when we're having this conversation. Do we give up? You can ask Daniel. When someone says that to me, I get angry. Because that's not fair to say that. First of all, you never give up. I don't know anybody who has ever given up, okay? Sometimes they change what they're fighting for. Sometimes they change their opponent. But nobody just gives up. That's not the way that it works. What does it mean to focus on comfort? So that's the other thing. That's one of our common kind of phrases is, we're just changing what you're fighting for. We're going to fight to keep you comfortable. That's what we're going to fight for. We're going to fight to get you home, see your dog, be with your grandkids, right? So that's what comfort means, is when we shift the goal of your care. It's no longer about keeping you alive longer. It's no longer about poking you and scanning you and doing all these procedures. Our shift focuses to making sure that you're not nauseous, that you can eat your cheesecake, that you can go to the bathroom, right? Those are the things that we fight for. What if we make the wrong decision? Has anybody ever felt that? What if I do the wrong thing? What if I make the wrong decision? And the truth is, honestly, is that there is not a right and wrong decision, right? Because if you're making decisions for someone or even yourself, you're doing it out of love, right? You're doing it because that's the information that you have at the time, and that's the best that you feel like you can do for your loved one. So there's no wrong decision, okay? And the other, are we playing God? It always, I hope that you guys love me enough to get my humor, but there's so many times where I'm sitting in an ICU room with a family, and they say, well, we're going to put it in God's hands. And I'm like, okay, so if this person's heart stops, then we're going to let him go naturally. Well, no, we want you to shock him, and we want you to do CPR, and like, but I'm sorry, I thought we were going to put it in God's hands, right? So I guess that means something different to everyone. Because to me, I don't know about you, but my God doesn't need a life support machine, or any of those other machines for that matter. But that's a big one for people, and I always say to them, you're giving yourself way too much power. Do not feel like you're determining that person's life or death. You're not that strong. You're not that powerful, right? This is also my favorite one. You don't know my mom. She's a fighter. I hear that at least once a day. And I'm like, well, great. That's awesome. What are we helping Mom fight for? Okay? I'm not asking her to stop fighting. I'm just asking you guys to think about what you're fighting for. And we always joke that I am 100% sure when my kids are standing over my bed in the hospital, they're going to say, you don't know her mom. She ain't going to do anything. She is not a fighter. Just call it like she's not going to do that. Yes, Kennedy absolutely will, yeah. They'll unplug me just to charge their phones. Yeah. We were just talking in the hallway, and I said something about pulling the plug, because you hear that's what most people say is pulling the plug, even though there's no plug. There's no plug. But she said, I don't want any plug. And I was like, you want to be wireless? And she was like, yes, that's exactly what I want. I want to be wireless. So this is just, ways that you can kind of change the way that you're thinking about death. And I know that it's kind of ingrained in us as humans to fight, right? To, try to persevere and survive and that sort of thing. But the truth is that, when you're with someone who is dying, that's really an honor. And somebody asked me last week, have you ever actually been with someone when they died? And I thought, man, I'd have to think about it, but it's a lot. I've been with a lot of people when they've taken their last breaths. And what a privilege that is. We were talking the other day, and it was actually a pretty smart thing that my coworker said. Death's a lot like labor. Going out of the world's a lot like coming into the world. Sometimes it's fast. Sometimes it takes days, right? Sometimes it's comfortable and sometimes it is not, right? So leaving the world oftentimes looks like when you're coming into the world. So it's a big honor for me, and I see people all the time at Walmart and other places, and they're like, "You were with my dad when he died," and I can usually remember him for the most part, but that's a blessing for me. And like I've told you before, I've learned way more from dying people than I ever have people who are living. And just supporting that transition. I know I told you the story last week about the guy that's his daughter smelled Jesus, and they just kind of ushered him into heaven, and how beautiful that was, and how really that's how death should be treated. It should be treated as a transition from this life on to the next. So being prepared, educating yourself on disease processes. We all live in the world of Google. Be careful with the Google machine. Just, I had a lady tell me the other day, well, I'll just check the Google machine. And I was like, oh, I don't know what that is. Okay. You do have to be careful when you're Googling things. But truthfully, we live in a time where you've got access to more education than ever, right? So there's tons and tons and tons of websites and research available for things like congestive heart failure, chronic pulmonary disease, cancers. All of those are right at your fingertips. Educate yourself on what that looks like, what that trajectory looks like, because that's going to help prepare you in how to deal with those things. And I read this the other day, and I thought it was pretty smart. But inwardly prepare yourself. Does that make sense? Not everyone, especially the person that's dying, maybe needs to see you preparing yourself, right? Because you're supposed to be there to support that person. I like this quote. It says, I see a good death as one where a patient can express what they feel, what they fear, where they find peace, and where the family is willing to talk about the journey of death. And it is a journey oftentimes. So don't shy away from the discussion. I mean, I think we've said that a million times, right? Listen, be supportive. Ask what your role will be. Again, I make a lot of jokes about Appalachia, but it's just because it's like who I am in my soul. Not everybody's going to be your medical power of attorney. Okay? Please don't let everyone be your medical power of attorney. But the truth is that you can kind of assign things as you think your family would be good at. Right? So this is the person I want to make my medical decisions. But maybe I want to ask this person to sing at my funeral. Or maybe I want to ask this person to be a pallbearer. Or come and pray with me at my bedside. Right? So that was another good question. I think when you're looking for words to say to dying people, that's a good one. If you're looking for the right thing to say, how can I help you? What can I do? How can I be supportive for you? And this is also very important. Dying patients have very little control of anything. Oftentimes they can't control what's happening. They can't control the symptoms that they're having, shortness of breath, pain, all of these things they have very little control over. But what they do have control over is how they die. And that is such a powerful thing that you can give someone to say, listen, there's a bunch of things here you can't control, but what you can control is where do you want to be? That patient that I saw this week, where do you want to be? Home. Please send me home. And it made me nervous because she has a lot going on, and I thought, I don't know if that's the best idea. And I said, okay, in order for me to make that happen, we have to do a few things. And she said, do it. I was like, okay, that's what we'll do. And I'm still nervous about it, but that's what she wanted, right? And I've already told you I do whatever the patient wants, even if I don't think it's necessarily the greatest idea. Providing a peaceful environment. So again, Appalachia, right? What happens when Mama's in the hospital here in West Virginia, Ohio? Everybody comes. Yes, I mean it's a common joke that they bring coolers and little Debbie cakes, right? It's why we have ants in all the waiting rooms. And what'd you say? Insects. But and like we've talked about before, people die as they lived. And so if you think Mamaw enjoys that, having 87 people in the room, then great. But that's not always the case, right? There's a very common thing with nurses that oftentimes it's too loud in the room for people to die. If it's and not always. Some people that doesn't seem to bother, but there are patients who the minute everyone leaves, they pass away. um, and so that's kind of the joke with the nurses is it's been too loud in there to pass, right? So again, talking about those things, who do you want there? Who do you want to be at your bedside? Do you want all of these people to come in, or would you rather them not? What is it? No, yeah. Well, see, because you've talked about it. Okay, good, good. Well, and that's the other thing, oftentimes when you're dying, that's maybe not. So, little old ladies in their 80s are a different breed of women. They're amazing. They come into the ER, they have freshly painted fingernails, they have lipstick on. I am amazed by that generation of women. I'm like in a scrunchie and I'm at work, and they're like, beautiful. Um, but it's funny because like you'll hear families say she'd be upset if she knew that we let people in here to see her without lipstick on or without her. Daniel had an aunt who had the most amazing eyebrows on the planet, like, and she had metastatic cancer for years, but she always had her eyebrows on. And so sometimes I think there's some truth to that when there's 80 of you in there and Mamaw don't have her teeth in. If that's going to be upsetting to Mamaw, then, maybe that's not the best option. So this is my favorite part of death, is when you get those families together and everybody starts telling stories about Mamaw. That's the best. Actually, when my grandfather passed away, we had, instead of everybody signing in, we had everybody write their favorite memory, and we read it at his funeral. And it was awesome, right? Because my grandpa was, he was about this big, and he was just as round as he was tall. And he just was the life of the party. He just was always laughing and always funny, and people just had so many great stories to tell about him. And so that is one, good thing about having big families around and stuff is you'll get to hear lots of good stories about these people, and they love telling the staff, stories about that person. But that's good. I think that not only allows to be some joy brought into that room, but it also helps you with grieving, right? If you're remembering all those good memories and all those fun times. And this is a big one, allowing there to be some reconciliation if there needs to be. We have that a lot. I think I told you the first week that I called a jail. I'd love to say that's the first time I've called a jail, but that wouldn't be true. But you'll see a lot of that. Somebody will want to talk to somebody that they've got some beef that they need to clear up, or they need to apologize for, and you'll see that a lot, and that is so important for patients. If they haven't seen someone in 15 years, or they haven't spoken to their parents, or their kids, that happens a lot. Giving people permission to release, and I know a lot of people think that that's not a real thing, but I'm here to tell you it is. We oftentimes tell family members, tell them it's okay, that you'll be okay, that it's okay for them to go. That's particularly true with parents and kids. I mean, most of us are parents in this room. That's what they're worried about. Are my kids going to be okay, even if they're 60, right? So we encourage a lot of that. Tell this person it's okay. I'm going to be okay. And not only that, but I had a lady who had a son that had Down syndrome. Oh my gosh, I would have taken him home with me in a second. Um, but as she was dying, that was her big thing, is who's going to take care of this child that she had pretty much taken care of by herself for 40 years, right? So that was a lot of convincing her that he's going to be taken care of. You know, we've made arrangements. We did all the legal paperwork to sign him over guardian wise. You know, this is okay. Everything's going to be okay. I like this too. A good death honors a whole life. Right? I think that's just so true. It's so true that, you know, as someone's dying, that whole conversation of what their life has been about um, comes into play, and you really get to know a lot about somebody at the end of their life. You really figure out what's most important to them. Um, this is also, I think, something that's really funny. People who hold on for something, right? And I think this is interesting. 14% of people die on their birthdays. Isn't that interesting? I think. Yeah, but that's true. I mean, I remember even being as a kid, like looking at tombstones and be like, they died on their birthday, and that's because they were probably holding on till their birthday. I had a little lady one time tell me she was just waiting to be on the Smucker's jar, like that was her goal. She wanted to be on the Willard Scott Smucker jar. Yeah, life goals. Um, sorry. It in fact was. Um, the human will is very, very, very strong. I'll tell you my favorite mommy story. Um, I had a lady that had metastatic lung cancer that I'd gotten very close to. She was just the kind of person that made you feel better when you walked in. Um, she knew all the staff. She knew my kids' names. She knew my anniversary. She was just an awesome, awesome, awesome lady. Great faith, just a great person. Her husband was great. Her daughter was a nurse where I worked. And so in January, as I often do, I said, I need a goal. I need you to tell me what one thing is that you, like, this is what we're going to strive for. And the daughter was to graduate nurse practitioner school in May. And she was like, I want to be at graduation. I was like, okay, well, that's what we're going to work toward then, okay? We're going to put all our eggs into getting you there. And so she did okay till about March. Then she started coming in more frequently. And by that time, the cancer had gone to her brain. And things kind of quickly started to deteriorate. And you could tell she was nervous, right, that we weren't going to get there. And so probably the end of April, she came in to the ICU. Her blood pressure was really low. And I thought, we're not going to make it. Sorry. And I was like, okay, so I'm like literally calling every person I know that works in IT. And I'm like, here's what I need you to do. I need you to go to Marshall's graduation. I need you to set up some kind of camera, right? Or we'll televise it to the ICU. Like we have to make this lady see this girl graduate. And so on Monday when I came in, she was on blood pressure medicine to keep her blood pressure up. She was minimally responsive. And I was like, well, I don't even think this is going to work, right? And so I bent down to listen to her. And I must have said something about what was on TV. This was on a Wednesday. And she opened her eyes, and she looked at me, and she said, today's Wednesday. I was like, yeah, hey, today's Wednesday. And she said, tomorrow's graduation. And I was like somebody punched me in the gut because I was like, I didn't want to tell her that tomorrow was graduation, right? And I was like, yeah, tomorrow's graduation. But don't worry, right? We've got a whole team of people that's going to go there, and they're going to televise it. And she was like, no, I'm going to be there. And I'm like, there's no chance this is happening. And I will never forget this. I came in the next morning, and this sweet little bald lady is sitting on the side of her bed, and someone is painting her fingernails. And there's a dress hanging in the closet. And I was like, she's going. I mean, I believe her. She's going to go. And so, again, I'm like calling, I owe so many people favors. I'm like calling everyone I know. I'm like, listen, I don't know how we're going to make this happen, but we have to. Like, she's done this. We have to do this for her. And we literally signed her out for 2 hours. Okay, we didn't discharge her. We signed her out for 2 hours. She took a nurse with her. And the great thing was, I even told one of the hospitals, I'm like, she's in a room of nurses. I mean, like, it's fine. And we wheeled her up, and her daughter gave the commitment speech. And we wheeled her back out, and back to her hospital bed she went. And she died on Sunday. That was on Thursday. And so I think all the time, the only reason that happened is because she willed it to happen. There is no other reason why this lady should have been able to do that. But mommy power is real, and it is strong. And so a lot of times now when people say that to me, and I think, I don't know, I think about that. And I think, you know what, I'm not going to count you out, because you may very well call me my bluff there. And so this is another good piece of advice, I think. If you are that family that's going to sit in that room all day and all night, at least take a little break, right? Make sure you're eating. Get you some rest. Because the truth is that if you're hungry and you haven't slept, you're not going to be very rational to make decisions. So take breaks. So, and I know we've said this already, but, discussing the death doesn't make it happen. Talking about it doesn't mean you're willing it to happen. It's often in reverse, right? You're often talking about it because it is happening. And again, sometimes death is the better option. And I just love this. Somebody sent me this, actually, I think on Facebook. And that's true. I mean, we're all really just walking each other home. Oh, is that it? Look, I did good tonight. Yeah. Does anybody have any questions about anything? We've got like 20 minutes.
When they are taking their last breaths and they're like fighting to breathe, what do you do about that? Are they aware? I mean, it's like they're drowning. That would be hard for me to sit there and watch someone.
Yeah, it is hard for us too. Yes. And so that's kind of the reason that when we shift gears, so when I go in and we talk about things and the goal is comfort, then everything changes. You're giving medications to prevent that. And like we talked the other day, there's oftentimes I can't give someone medicine because we haven't came to that decision of comfort yet. And so we're still worrying about things like their blood pressure and their oxygen level and all that. But when you're truly making someone comfortable, you ain't worried about that, right? So if someone's gasping for air, I'm going to give you medicine.
Okay.
And if I make your blood pressure low, it makes your blood pressure low. But in a true comfort setting, everything is done to prevent suffering at all costs. Right, so there's lots of medications that we give.
And just like you talked about people dying on their birthdays,
Uh-huh.
Isn't it strange, like, in a family, there'll be 3?
Yeah, the 3 rule.
Yes.
Yeah, that's not even just on the family. That's on a nursing unit, right? Like, you'll see nurses, like, when that first death happens, and then the second one happens, and everybody's like, yeah. Because it seems that is the case, that there's always that 3. Yeah, see? They're very similar, birth and death. It's Yeah, full moons. Yes, happens the same.
I just wanted to say something about that, about this waiting for a special time, because my mom, when she was dying, we was in hospice, and my dad's birthday was on August the 1st, and we had a birthday party in her room.
Mm-hmm.
And her first and only grandson birthday was the 2nd, and we had a birthday party in her room.
Yeah,
And on the morning of the 3rd, she passed away.
yeah.
So I was thinking about that. She waited for that.
Mm-hmm. That happens a lot. And that's that brings me to another good point. It seems like sometimes when when we make that decision, okay, we're going to keep grandma comfortable, for some reason people think that means they're going to pass away very quickly. And that is not often the case. And what happens is a couple days go by, everybody's tired, nobody's sleeping, right? Everybody's just eating Little Debbie cakes. And then everybody starts thinking, well, maybe we made the wrong decision. Maybe we should do this, or maybe we should do that, or, and so I think it's really important as a medical team to say it's a process. It sometimes it takes, if you've got kidney disease, sometimes it takes your heart and your lungs a little while to catch up to your kidneys, right? So that's another kind of, I think, common misconception. When you take people off that life support machine, oftentimes they do not pass away immediately, okay? They may live several days, depending on a few things. But, that's another, when we talk to patients who were taking off their families who were taking off the respirator, the life support. I say that because there's been so many times I've walked into a room and I'm like, did Mama talk about, like, would she want to be on, well, she didn't want to be on life support. I'm like, oh, see all this. But they don't know that that's life support, right? Because life support's a machine that says life support. So, again, that's a lot of clarification of, that's what this is. That's a good point. Maybe, I don't know. That's right. On the dialysis machine. Yeah, water making machine. But I mean, that's a good point. People don't know that. And again, that's where we fail as a medical community, because we don't explain that very well to people. I mean, I can't tell you the number of times I've been in rooms with doctors and I'm like, no, no, what do you, no. This is temporary. It's not temporary. We're just trying to get this person over the hump. This isn't a hump. There's no humps here, right? And again, I'm talking about terminally ill patients, not if you've been in a car wreck or something like that, but yeah. So maybe I work with some really great physicians, and there are really great doctors out there. The problem is the way that they're taught, right? Because it's the same with nurses. I did not learn anything about death in all of my 900 years of nursing school. 9 years. Yeah, still got the student loans to prove it. But it's just not something we talk a whole lot about. And that's the problem, because oftentimes you'll get in a room with a doctor or a nurse, and they don't know how to speak to death because they're supposed to be there to fix people, right? You are here to fix and cure everyone. And that's silly, But that's the problem, is that we don't teach them how to talk about death and dying, and they're so uncomfortable that oftentimes when they do talk about it, you're just like, no, stop, just don't. But that's the problem, is that, and the other thing is, like we've talked before, doctors are never going to talk to you in absolute. You know, they're never going to say to you, this is 100% not going to work. Because they can't say that, right? Because there's always that outlier. So that's the other issue is, you know, I mean, they can say things like, we think, or, you know, studies show, or, you know, something like that, but it's really hard to talk in absolute terms. Sorry.
I'm sorry. Sometimes I feel sorry for non-medical people because we take it for granted they know what that machine is and what this medication is. And they have the right to question, and their family has the right to question. So please question your doctors, and you have that right. They don't walk on water.
That's really good advice. And I told you before, when I'm talking to a family, I will tell them things like, you ask them what they would do if it was their mom. And they hate that. They hate it when I do that to them. But I feel like that's a fair thing to ask. And I think you should treat people like that was your family. If we all did that, I mean, healthcare would be great. But yeah, that's a good point. Ask lots of questions. Lots of questions. Yeah. And educate yourself. Anybody else? Oh. I'll do it.
Previous experience without details. When they extubate a patient that has been on life support and they're struggling to breathe, but someone has said, no, you cannot give them morphine, because they were told by the nurse that they give them morphine when they extubate, and it's kind of a toss-up of whether the morphine kills them or they just stop breathing. So now they're told not to give morphine. Was that true? Should that have happened? Explain that.
Okay. I don't understand why morphine has this, like, I had a patient tell me one time, it was a comedian we were listening to. He's like, that's what they gave Private Ryan before he died. But I mean, morphine's not a bad thing. Let's just clear that up real quick, okay? And in the world of narcotics, it's the weakest. It is the weakest drug, narcotic-wise, that we have. But for some reason, when people hear that word, we think of euthanasia, okay? And that is not legal in this state, just so you know. I always offer morphine to my dying patients. Always. Not 50 milligrams, okay? There's an appropriate dose. But morphine does lots of great things for dying patients. It helps to relax respiratory muscles, okay? So when your respiratory muscles are relaxed, you can breathe easier, okay? It helps with pain. It's great for pain control, right? So yes, I am a huge advocate for that. The trick, for me at least, is to making it available. It's there if you need it. I'm not going to force it on you. I'm not going to bring it if you don't want it. I'm not going to bring it if your family tells me they don't think you need it. But it's there if you need it. So that's one of those things that takes a lot of, we get that a lot. You know, we don't want her to have morphine. Well, tell me why. Is it because you just have this negative thought of that? But the truth is that you have to give people quite a bit of morphine to stop their respirations, okay? And nobody's going to do that. Nobody's going to let that happen. But it does allow for people to pass away comfortably, which is the goal.
I think we just have a negative connotation on what drugs can do. We've got so many people that it's involved. I mean, it's touched so many different lives on so many different levels. Drugs are not bad. They're good when they're needed. And I mean, anybody in a situation where they're hurting and they're in pain, they probably need it. So, especially if your loved ones are sitting there and they're suffering, please, especially if it's the end of their life, let them have some drugs so that they can be comfortable. Because we don't want to see them suffering. I wouldn't want to be suffering, right? I mean, that's what it comes down to. It's not about what you're pushing on someone, because you're not pushing it on them. You're trying to make it easier for them to be here, and you want it to be a good experience and not a struggle to the end.
Yes, perfectly stated. Yeah, that's another thing. My little terminally ill patients. There's two kinds of people in the world. There's people who may let me give them a Tylenol every 6 hours. And then there are people who will take everything that I give them, right? But this happened a lot. You remember like a year ago when the big fentanyl scare happened? We were finding fentanyl patches in pools and fentanyl is one of my favorite drugs because no. But fentanyl patches are great for my little cancer patients who can't swallow because they don't have to swallow it, right? It just goes right on their arm, and it's great for pain control. But so many times, the minute that fentanyl word comes out of my mouth, people get like, woo, yeah. And so actually I put a fentanyl patch on a lady the other day, and she was like, is this going to kill me? And I was like, are you going to lick it? Right? If you're going to lick it, it might. But if you wear it like I tell you to wear it, no. It is not going to kill you. Yeah. So again, education. It's another word when I mention OxyContin. That's a big one for people. Now, they'll let me give them oxycodone all day. But the minute I say OxyContin, that's a name brand. You know what OxyContin is? Oxycodone. But a lot of times it's just reiterating and educating my little old 80-year-old men with metastatic prostate cancer, and I'm trying to get their pain under control, and they say things like, I don't want to get addicted. It's fine. It's fine. It'll be okay. Yeah, but you're right. A lot of it is just that we hear so much bad about drugs. And, I tell my patients all the time, those people that you're hearing about are treating pain. They're not treating pain, right? They're treating this kind of pain. That's different. Yeah. Oh, go ahead. PT will yell at me.
Well, I was going to let you talk about it. No, so the frustration I hear from you a lot is that you'll have a patient. Yeah, is a lot. There are so many things. No, a lot of time, or there have been several times that you come home and talk about your frustration with a family that don't want this patient to take all this pain medicine because they're lethargic. But however, the option B is they lay there in misery, but they're awake.
Yeah, that's true. As a matter of fact, that's a lot of discussion whenever I am taking someone off the ventilator, because my favorite way to do that is I want to give people a little bit of medicine before I take them off the ventilator. That way they're already good and comfy by the time that tube comes out. But sometimes families will say, well, we just want to see him open his eyes one more time. And I'm like, that's a Russian roulette is what that is. Because what if they're writhing in pain, or gasping for air? Then it's going to take a lot more intervention to get that back under control. So yes, I think you do have to kind of weigh it out, right? Do we want Mamaw to be awake and miserable, or do we want Mamaw to be sleepy and comfy, right? So yeah, that's a good point. I always opt for sleepy and comfy. Always. You make him lick the patch. Yeah. Don't lick patches. I'm kidding. She's a nurse. I ain't got nothing for you. She can do, yeah. That's right. That's right. Um, and I don't know if you guys read a lot about things that's happening in the world, but there was actually a physician in Columbus over the last probably couple weeks that got in trouble for giving his dying patients a little bit of excessive medication, and it was excessive, but I don't know what his thoughts were, and I don't know what that person was going through. I can tell you personally that I have been in rooms where people were in so much pain that I would have given them whatever I needed to make them comfortable. When cancer gets in certain areas of your body, it is very painful. It can be. And so I've been in rooms where I will give you whatever you need to be comfortable. I don't care what your blood pressure is. You're just like terrible at this job.
Well, you're a lot closer than I am, so.
Whenever that pain gets out of control like that, to get it back under control, you have to give a whole lot more medicine right in the beginning. And I don't know that people understand that as well, because, I mean, it is a constant battle just to try to keep people from not, like, writhing.
And again, when comfort's the goal, then comfort's the goal. And,
I think you have to think of the person and not yourself. They're the one in pain. It's not me. So think of them. And I always wanted to back up what you said about saying, okay, my father had a cerebral hemorrhage on a helicopter from here to Columbus Hospital. He was in neurosurgery ICU, couldn't do surgery. 9 days. Then they came to me because they were coding him. So I finally talked his wife into enough's enough, please. So she signed the paper. He still was trying to hang on. And I finally bent down in his ear and said, Daddy, it's okay. We'll be fine. And gone. Just like that. So I think you have to do that. Don't be selfish.
That's a good point. Because it's oftentimes the family that is saying things like, we don't want Mama to have morphine. Well, why? And oftentimes you're right. It's more for their comfort level. Even in my own family, I told you we had both my grandparents home with hospice, and they were taking sublingual morphine, which is liquid morphine that goes under the tongue. And even my own family, nobody wants to give it, because what if you gave the last dose, right? But that's scary for people. They don't want to be that person that potentially, right, even though we all knew what was actually ending this person's life, it makes people uncomfortable. Well, good job.
Wow. Gee, I forgot what I was going to say now. I just you was talking about how the family feels about medication and stuff. And when my mom was sick at home before she went to hospice, we was in charge of that schedule and the fentanyl patches and the morphine under the tongue and all this stuff. And everybody in the house was like wired for sound because we was afraid, if we give her this with this and,
Right.
Because we're not experienced like that. And each one of us had that fear, like, is what I'm doing going to interfere with what she did 4 hours ago? And, how often do we do that? It was just so much stress on top of what was really happening. And I just remember how scared we all was about that. So
and that's another, like we talked about last week, most people want to die at home, and I'm all for that. But that is often the problem when people die at home, is that the family don't get to be the family. They have to be the caregiver and the family. And that can sometimes be very difficult unless that family is is able to figure that out and be okay with, hey, I'm giving Mama morphine every 2 hours, or
Just let me confess about something.
okay.
So my mom had that wish, you know, she wanted to be at home.
Mm-hmm.
And we really did try.
Yeah.
We tried and failed. All of us did, because it got so bad that we couldn't, you know, it was just too much. And I remember telling my aunt, I said, we can't let Mom die here, because the home was my grandparents built the house, and my grandparents lived there till they passed. My mom lived there, and now I'm living there. And all of us made that selfish decision, and I still struggle with it, because I was like, we can't let Mom die here. You know, none of us can take care of her the way she needs to be taken care of. And so the decision was made for her to be moved to hospice, and I struggle with that still all these years later, because I think I didn't do what she wanted.
Did you get to take her home? Was she home for a while?
She was home for a while.
Okay, then you didn't fail. You gave her that wish. And honestly, at least from my perspective, I would much rather a family look at me and say, we can't do this, than to do it in a way where she maybe doesn't die peacefully, and then you have to live with that, right? We do that a lot. And I think Holly's going to talk maybe about hospice, but there are tons of patients who I send home, they're there 3 hours, and they're either back in the emergency room or they ship them to the hospice house. And that's okay. And families say that a lot. But they really wanted to be home. And I say, and you took them home. Okay? So you granted that. You granted her wish of being home. Not being able to provide that is okay. That's hard even for people who are trained to do that, right? So don't feel bad. You know, again, talking about my own family, there's 8,000 of us, right? We're Appalachian. And, I mean, my grandma was home, a month, 3 weeks, something. We were exhausted, you know, and a few of us are medical people. It's a lot. I mean, it's a lot to take care of someone 24/7. You don't have all the stuff. Yeah. Right. I mean, you know, in the hospital, there's several nurses that can turn people and clean them and that sort of thing. And at home, you're literally just trying to do what you can. So for me, that's okay. I'm okay when somebody says, I can't do that. That's just more than I can handle. I'd rather know that up front, because we can come up with a different way to make sure that patient dies comfortably. It's a rough day.
As somebody who took care of my mother, when she probably would have liked to have stayed in her own house, but she really wasn't able to, and she had dementia,
Yeah.
Alzheimer's, I'm not sure which one's which, but she wasn't who she was. And so I moved her down here, sold her house, etc., moved her in with me, and I took care of her for a year and a half, something like that, through a broken hip, through pneumonia, through all kinds of stuff, in and out of nursing homes and hospitals. And I was chief cook and bottle washer. I bathed her. I dressed her. I drew the line at some of the female things that female doctors wanted me to do. And I said, no, Mom, you have to do that yourself.
Yeah.
I can't do that. I'll get it ready for you, but I'm not going to do that. And in the end, she wound up in, she did assisted living for a while, but then she wound up in hospice right before the end. And that is my big fear, is that my kids would remember me that way,
Yeah.
rather than now.
Yeah.
Don't do that to your kids.
And that
I know.
And something that I think that we try to, kind of reiterate to family is sometimes when people say they want to be home, they don't mean in their house. If you're surrounded by people that love you, that's your home, right? So, sometimes the better option is the hospice house or, somewhere where you've got people who can be the caregiver and you get to be the family. And that's okay. Yeah. It is wonderful.
Be a family. It let
Yeah.
us surround mom without the thought of who's doing this and who's doing that. It really was a peaceful, wonderful thing. I am grateful to hospice,
Yeah.
really.
They're a great organization. Anybody else? Yeah, actually, no, you can come, it's fine. What he said to me was, I want my children to remember me healthy. And I said, well, I don't think that I can give you that, but what if we let your children remember you comfortable at home, right? I mean, I can't take this cancer from your body, and I can't make you who you were a year ago. But what we can do is get you home and make sure that you're comfortable so that you can interact. And that's going to be a gift to them.
Thanks, Crystal. I mean, so many things I could say to affirm, not that she needs to be affirmed, but that could affirm what, as far as people I've visited in hospital or at hospice, where before I would pray with them, I would whisper in their ear, you did a great job raising this family, and they're going to be fine. And I know in one case, I didn't get to my car before they passed away. I mean, a lot of times they just need to hear that affirmation, everything's going to be okay. Just having this conversation, right even here, right now. There's probably more conversation about death and dying that's happened in the last 7 weeks than in all of our lives put together. We probably have never just even broached the situation. So, it's fulfilling, I guess, to me to know that these conversations are happening and that we're talking about, what do we want to be there at the end? How do we want our family to respond? What do we need them to do for us? Holly is going to come in and talk about hospice in 3 weeks, and they get a really bad rap, They should just change their name to Death House because that's the way everybody thinks. You're going to go to hospice. They're going there to... No, they're there because they know how to help people make the transition. And I got a phone or a text message recently from someone who had a family member that was dying, and the text message was kind of, you can read text messages with the attitude that you want to read it with, right? But I can just kind of see this person shaking their head while they're texting, And it was, these nurses are giving her way too much morphine. They're just trying to hurry up and kill her, type thing. It's like, well, number one, I don't know why you're texting me that. But number two, my response was, I'm sure they're following doctor's orders. Have you talked to a doctor? I mean, if you have an issue, then talk to somebody about it. If you just have the 87 people eating the little Debbie cakes that becomes large Deborah cakes, if that's who you're if that's who you're talking to, then it's just going to escalate, right? I mean, it's just going to get bigger and bigger. Nope, nothing's going to get settled. So just having the conversation, I think, is awesome. Last thing, don't blame me for not getting a microphone to anybody, all right? Because what you tolerate, you propagate. I told them to raise their hand. You went with a mic when they just started talking. Let's stand. I appreciate Crystal. I really do. I know that, she is so qualified to talk about this because it is what she does. And I appreciate the way she can just be blunt in her own way, but yet it doesn't feel like she's being blunt, and I appreciate that. Yeah, I know she loves what she does. So next week, as far as we know, last week for Crystal, then Beth Wallace will come in from Slack Wallace Funeral Home for a week, and then Tracy Schneider 1 week, and then Holly's going to come in, and then we'll finish up with some Q&A the week after that. And I appreciate you being here. This is just awesome. Thankful that, I mean, we took a chance, right? We're going to have a class on death and dying, and we could have had 2 people show up, right? But instead, we had twice as many people as we normally have. So, do it again? Well, I'm thinking about starting a series after this on how to live well. You know, I mean, it's kind of followed up there. Well, we'll try. We'll see where we're headed. Lord, thank you for this time together. Thank you for Crystal Vance and just her heart, God, for this process that she is helping us to understand, helping us to have the conversation, helping us, Lord God, to look into that time frame, into that future time frame where we need to have a thought, a plan, a strategy, something in our minds, Lord God, to help us transition from this life to the next. So thank you for her and for her wisdom, her knowledge, and what she shares with us. I pray you'll help us to continue the conversation, not just here in this classroom, but with our families, with those people that are important to us. So thank you for that. Be with us tonight as we leave this place. Keep us safe. We love you. It's in Christ's name that we pray. Someone shout amen. Amen. We'll see you the next time. Shake someone's hand, hug someone's neck, bump someone's knuckles, tell them you're glad to see them in church.